In 2013, Twitter was still not a profit machine. The New York Times had been operating for more than a century. It had history, brand, journalists, subscribers, infrastructure, real assets, and a cultural position that was impossible to ignore. And yet, the market could value Twitter's future more highly than the newspaper's present. The uncomfortable question was not which company was more important. The question was different. Which one could capture more cash flow over the next 10 or 15 years? That difference looks financial, but it is actually strategic, because a company can be huge, known, and necessary, and still be trapped in a market where competition destroys value. And another company can look small, incomplete, or even absurd, while building a position where competition still does not know how to enter. That is the core of 0 to 1. It is not a book about entrepreneurship. It is not a collection of Silicon Valley quotes. It is not an ideological defense of monopoly. It is a hard thesis about value creation and value capture. Peter Thiel is saying something many operators do not want to hear. Competition is not a sign of ambition. Competition may be a sign that you accepted the wrong game. Most companies try to win by being a little better. Better product, better price, better marketing, better execution, better sales team, better dashboard. But if everyone is playing the same game, with the same metrics, against the same rivals, selling to the same customers, and copying the same practices, the natural result is not power. It is erosion. Margins fall. CAC rises. Talent becomes more expensive. Differentiation turns into narrative. And the customer learns that everyone is replaceable. That is the point. If your strategy consists of competing better, you probably entered too late. The most valuable companies do not win by competing harder. They win because they escape competition. They create a category. They dominate a niche. They discover a secret. They build an advantage so large that the rest cannot respond with a simple incremental improvement. The thesis of this video is direct. Competition makes you poor, not because competition is morally bad, but because competition compresses the economic space where your company can capture value. And if you cannot capture value, it does not matter how much value you create. Your company becomes a machine of work that benefits the customer, the supplier, the employee, the competitor, and the market, but not the owner of the system. This is not a summary of 0 to 1. We are not walking through chapters. We are not doing a biography of Peter Thiel. And we are not reducing the book to a childish phrase like, be different. That is the worst possible reading. The problem is not being different. The problem is being different in a dimension that creates economic power. Because you can be different and still be irrelevant. You can have a strange product and no market. You can have a contrarian idea and no distribution. You can have brilliant technology and no ability to sell it. You can have vision and no cash flow. What matters is not aesthetic difference. What matters is structural difference. In this video, we will turn 0 to 1 into 3 executable playbooks. Playbook 1, Escape Competition. You will see why perfect competition, which sounds efficient in theory, can be a trap of low margins and constant substitution for a company. Playbook 2, Find the Secret. You will see why the best opportunities are not in obvious markets, but in important truths that few accept or that many see but underestimate. Playbook 3, Build Power Before You Scale. You will see why a superior product is not enough and why you need proprietary technology, distribution, network effects, economies of scale, or brand before trying to expand. The promise is simple. By the end of this video, you should be able to look at your company, your product, or your investment thesis and answer an uncomfortable question. Am I building something with power, or am I only competing for crumbs in an obvious market? Because the mistake is not having competitors. The mistake is building a company whose only defense is executing better than them every quarter. That is not strategy. That is a treadmill. First, the central distinction of the book: horizontal progress versus vertical progress. Horizontal progress is going from 1 to n. Taking something that already works and copying it, expanding it, distributing it, or replicating it. More restaurants, more agencies, more similar apps, more software with the same promise, more consulting firms selling the same transformation, more brands competing for the same consumer. That can create value, but it rarely creates power, because if the model is obvious, others can enter. If the customer understands all alternatives as equivalent, price becomes pressure. If the advantage depends on working harder, hiring more salespeople, or spending more on ads, competition ends up absorbing the surplus. Vertical progress is going from 0 to 1, creating something that did not exist before. Not necessarily a scientific invention. It can be a new category, a new distribution model, a way of packaging value that the market did not know how to ask for. A solution that turns an invisible problem into a dominant position. Here is the tension. Most companies say they want innovation, but operate with horizontal logic. They watch competitors, copy features, compare prices, follow benchmarks, hire talent from the same industry, optimize the same funnel, and call it strategy to move a little faster inside a race everyone understands. The problem is that a race understood by everyone is usually a race without power. If everyone knows where the prize is, the prize becomes expensive. If everyone sees the market attracts capital. If everyone uses the same narrative, differentiation becomes marketing. That is why Thiel insists so much on the idea of creative monopoly, not as permission to abuse the customer, but as the description of a company that created such a distinct position that it does not get trapped in perfect competition. A creative monopoly is not a company that wins because it blocks artificially. It is a company that wins because it does something nobody else can do the same way, at least for long enough, and that window of time is where value lives. Not in the launch excitement, not in this month's growth, not in the pitch, in the ability to capture future cash flows because the company is not easily replaceable. Playbook 1. Escape competition. Perfect competition is an elegant idea for economists and a nightmare for operators. In perfect competition, nobody has pricing power. Nobody has durable differentiation. Nobody captures surplus for very long. If there is margin, competitors enter. If there is demand, supply appears. If there is growth, capital arrives. If there is a tactic that works, it gets copied. And when everything gets copied, the company stops being a power machine and becomes an efficiency machine. You can see this clearly in airlines. Airlines create enormous value for the world. They connect cities, they move executives, they enable tourism, they allow commerce, they reduce distance. They are operationally complex, capital intensive, and socially important. But for long periods, as an industry, they have captured very little value compared to the value they create. Why? Because they compete in a category where the customer can easily compare price, routes, schedules, and convenience. The service can improve, but the seat on a comparable flight becomes substitutable. Costs are high. Assets are expensive. Price sensitivity is brutal, and any improvement quickly becomes either a standard or competitive pressure. That is strategic hell, creating value without capturing it. Now contrast that with Google. Google does not win because it competes every day against 10 equivalent search engines in the user's mind. It wins because, for years, the category search the internet became almost synonymous with Google. The user was not mentally running an RFP between search engines. They were not comparing providers. They were not negotiating price. They just searched. And every search fed data, distribution, habit, advertising, and position. That is not normal competition. That is power. The common executive mistake is believing that entering a large market is automatically attractive. Large market. Huge TAM. A lot of money moving. Many customers. It sounds logical. But large visible markets are traps if everyone else sees them too. A large market with intense competition can be worse than a small market where you can dominate. The question is not, how big is the market? The question is, how quickly can I become the company that is impossible to replace inside a specific submarket? The practical rule from the first playbook is this. If your product is only 20% better, you are competing. If it is 10 times better in a critical dimension, you can begin to escape. 20% better requires explanation. 10x is felt. Not in every dimension. Not for everyone, not from day one. But for a specific customer, in a specific problem, the jump must be so clear that comparison with alternatives becomes uncomfortable. It can be 10 times faster, 10 times cheaper, 10 times more reliable, 10 times simpler, 10 times more integrated, 10 times more distributable, 10 times more defensible. But it has to break the logic of substitution, because as long as the customer can say, this is more or less similar to the other thing, you are in competition. And in competition, the market learns to capture your margin. The practical action is to run a commodity audit. 5 questions. 1. Can the customer compare your offer with 3 alternatives in less than 5 minutes? 2. Does your main value proposition also appear on your competitors' websites? 3. Does your sales team need to justify price before explaining difference? 4. Does your growth depend on spending more on acquisition than the rival? 5. If tomorrow you lower price by 15%, do you win more deals? If you answer yes to 3 out of 5, you are in a competition trap. That does not mean your business is bad. It means your strategy has not yet created power. And here comes the central line of the block. Competing better does not get you out of competition. It only makes you a more efficient competitor. That can improve the quarter, but it does not necessarily build a valuable company over 10 or 15 years. The strategic question is not, how do we win more deals this month? The question is, what would have to be true for this market, a decade from now, to be unable to imagine itself without us? If that question sounds too ambitious, you are probably operating with a competition horizon, not a power horizon. Playbook 2. Find the secret. For Thiel, a valuable company is born around an important truth that few people accept. That is the famous question. What important truth do very few people agree with you on? But used superficially, that question becomes performative contrarianism. Many people answer it with provocative opinions. That is useless. A strategic secret is not a controversial phrase. It is a perception asymmetry that can be converted into a business advantage. Most people believe A. You believe B. But B is not just an opinion. B implies a product, market, distribution, or timing decision that others would not make. That is the point. A secret only matters if it changes what you do. If it does not change a decision, it is just a thought. PayPal is the central case. The big ambition could have been, create the digital wallet of the internet. It sounds enormous, it sounds fundable, it sounds visionary, but it is also too broad, too abstract, too hard to dominate at the beginning. The tactical move was much more specific. Find a microsegment with an acute need for digital payments. eBay power sellers, high volume sellers, concrete pain, high frequency, need to get paid fast. Clear incentive to adopt a tool that reduced friction. PayPal did not start by trying to convince the entire internet. It started by dominating a small market where pain was intense and utility was immediate. That is the pattern. Great businesses often begin in small markets that look too narrow for large competitors, and that is precisely why they are good. Because they allow concentration, they allow fast feedback, they allow density, they allow you to become the default inside a specific community. The common mistake is falling in love with TAM. This market is worth billions. That phrase kills more startups than it helps, because a huge market does not tell you where you can dominate. It only tells you where many will compete. The right question is, what is the smallest market where we can credibly become number 1? Not number 5. Not an emerging alternative. Not, we are also here. Number 1. Even if that market looks ridiculously small from the outside. The secret is not always in the technology. Sometimes it is in distribution, sometimes in timing, sometimes in the behavior of an ignored group, sometimes in a misunderstood regulation, sometimes in a category everyone considers too small, sometimes in a truth that large companies cannot accept because it contradicts their current model. That last point is key. The best opportunities are not always hidden because nobody sees them. Sometimes they are hidden because everyone dismisses them. It looks like a toy. It looks too niche. It looks unprofitable. It looks ugly. It looks impossible to sell internally. It looks like a bad idea for a respectable company. That is why incumbents ignore them, not because they are stupid, but because their incentive structure does not allow them to take those opportunities seriously. A large company needs large, clear, justifiable opportunities. A new company can live in a strange corner of the market for years. That is where the advantage appears. The practical action from the second playbook is to write your strategic secret with this formula. Most people believe the market works through X, but we are betting the real value will be captured through Y. Structural example. Most people believe digital payments is a massive market for all internet users, but we are betting it is first captured among high-frequency sellers inside eBay. Another formula. Most people believe this customer buys on price, but we are betting they buy on risk reduction. Or, most people believe this category is too small, but we are betting it is the entry point to a much larger category. If you cannot complete the sentence, you do not have a secret. You have positioning, and positioning can be copied. The secret cannot, because the secret leads you to make decisions that from the outside look too narrow, too early, or too strange, until they work. Playbook 3. Build power before you scale. This is where many people misunderstand 0 to 1. They think the book says, find a unique idea and build something brilliant. No, that is insufficient. A unique idea without power becomes free research for the next competitor. A good product without distribution stays trapped in a niche. Superior technology without a market ends up as a demo. A new category without defense fills with imitators as soon as it proves demand. That is why Thiel insists that valuable companies combine creation with capture. Creating value is not enough. You have to capture it. And to capture it, you need power. We can turn that power into 4 auditable pillars. 1. Proprietary technology. Is your solution clearly better in a critical dimension, or is it just better packaged? 2. Distribution. Do you have a superior way to reach the customer, sell, install yourself, or become the default? 3. Market structure. Does the business improve with scale, network, data, brand, or concentration? 4. Time horizon. Can the company capture value for 10 or 15 years, or is it only exploiting a tactical window that will close soon? That is the difference between growth and power. Growth is selling more. Power is selling more under conditions that become more favorable over time. Most people measure traction, few measure durability. But the value of a company does not live only in what it builds today. It lives in the probability that it can continue capturing future cash flows without being destroyed by competition. That is why the 10 to 15-year horizon matters so much. Not because of romanticism, because of valuation. If almost all the value of a company lives in the future, then the key question is not how good it looks today. The question is how defensible it will be tomorrow. Tesla is useful as a case, but it must be handled with precision. It should not be used as founder religion. It should be used as an example of integrating several pillars of power. Tesla was not just an electric car. The market already knew electric cars. The bet was much more complex. Make an electric car desirable with performance, software, brand, charging infrastructure, manufacturing, data, and a category narrative. The advantage did not live in one single piece. It lived in the combination. Technology, direct distribution, brand, partial vertical integration, infrastructure, accumulated learning, perception of the future. This matters because many operators look for the advantage as if it were one thing, a patent, a feature, a channel, an influencer, an algorithm. But real power is usually composite. It is not one wall, it is a system of walls. Google shows this too. Its power was not only having a good search engine, it was turning search into habit, habit into data, data into a better product into more usage into advertising inventory, and advertising inventory into a monetization machine. That circuit is not defended by product alone. It is defended by scale, data, distribution, brand, and advertising economics. That is why repeating "build a 10 times better product" is incomplete. The real question is 10 times better to enter and what power to stay. Because a 10 times improvement opens the door, but it does not guarantee others will not enter afterward. The practical action from the third playbook is the power matrix. Create 4 columns: technology, distribution, market structure, time horizon, and 3 rows: yes, partial, no, then audit without decoration. If you have product but no distribution, you are building so someone else can sell better. If you have distribution but no differentiated technology, you are doing arbitrage. If you have scale without defense, you are financing market education for future competitors. If you have growth without a 10-year horizon, you have a tactical opportunity, not an exceptional company. Here it is useful to distinguish 0 to 1 from other books in the channel. 7 Powers tells you how to defend an advantage. 0 to 1 forces you to ask whether you are building something worth defending. That difference is critical, because you can apply defense frameworks to a business that should never have existed. You can talk about switching costs, brand, scale, or network effects over a company that is only competing in an obvious market with a slightly better proposition. That is not power. That is strategic makeup. Good strategy/bad strategy teaches you to diagnose the bottleneck. 0 to 1 asks something earlier. Is your diagnosis pointing toward escaping competition or only toward playing better inside it? Platform Revolution designs ecosystems. 0 to 1 asks whether that ecosystem deserves to be built. The cold start problem explains how to ignite a network. 0 to 1 asks whether that network has a contrarian truth behind it or whether you are just copying a model everyone already understands. This is the editorial position of the video. We are not celebrating monopolies for provocation. We are saying that a company without power ends up serving everyone except itself. It creates jobs. It creates value for customers. It creates volume. It creates movement, but it does not capture enough surplus to become durable. And a company that does not capture value cannot reinvest, resist, innovate, or survive long-term. The common mistake is thinking strategy means winning against rivals. In 0 to 1, strategy means building a space where comparison stops being the axis. That is why the obvious market is so dangerous. It gives you fast validation, clear customers, visible competitors, abundant benchmarks, an understandable category, comfortable investors, but it also gives you substitution. Price wars, rising CAC, weak differentiation, and a race where the winner may end up winning very little. Let's synthesize the system. First, escape competition. Do not enter markets only because they are large. Do not confuse TAM with opportunity. Do not confuse execution with power. If everyone competes with the same logic, the surplus evaporates. Second, find the secret. A contrarian truth is not a provocative phrase. It is an operating belief that allows you to make a different decision, a different niche, a different customer, a different channel, a different architecture, a different timing. Third, build power before you scale. Do not scale only because you can capture demand. Scale when you have some cumulative defense, proprietary technology, superior distribution, network effects, economies of scale, brand, data, or a combination that reinforces itself over time. The order matters. Secret, niche, dominance, power, scale. Many do the opposite. They scale before dominating. They spend before differentiating. They hire before understanding. They build product before knowing what secret they defend. And they call growth what is actually exposure. The central line is this: competition makes you poor because it forces you to share the future with everyone who understood the same opportunity. A creative monopoly instead captures value because it builds something others did not understand in time, could not easily copy, or did not know how to distribute. The question is not, how do we beat the competition? The question is, what are we building that makes the competition irrelevant? That is a harder question. It is also more useful, because it forces you to stop thinking like a player inside the board and start thinking like the designer of the board. Immediate action. 20-minute audit. 5 questions. First, what is your strategic secret? Write it with this formula. Most people believe the market works through X, but we are betting the real value will be captured through Y. If you cannot write it, you probably do not have a thesis. You have positioning. Second, what is the smallest market you can dominate? Not the total market, not the 10-year vision, the entry point where you can become the obvious option. If your first market does not look small from the outside, it is probably not specific enough. Third, what dimension is 10 times better? Not we are better, not we have better service, not more simple. 10 times better in what metric, for whom, and against what alternative? Fourth, what is your distribution advantage? If your answer is marketing, you have not answered yet. Distribution means a superior, repeatable, and defensible path to the customer. Direct sales, embedded channel, product that distributes itself, high trust community, integration into an existing workflow, privileged relationship, something the competitor cannot buy tomorrow with the same budget. Fifth, what makes your company stronger in 10 years? If nothing accumulates, there is no power. If every year you start from zero, there is no power. If every sale costs the same as the previous one, there is no power. If every competitor can copy what matters, there is no power. The goal of this audit is not to feel good. It is to identify whether you are building a durable asset or an efficient operation trapped in competition. Because a company can grow and still fail to build power. It can build more and become more fragile. It can hire more and capture less. It can gain market share and lose margin. It can look successful and be running toward an industry where nobody wins much. That is what 0 to 1 wants you to see before it is too late. Closing. There is a brutal difference between building a company that sells and building a company that captures the future. The first can work. The second can become exceptional. But to capture the future, you have to stop worshipping competition. Competition feels serious. It feels disciplined. It gives you clear rivals. It gives you benchmarks. It gives you comparisons. It gives you a sense of progress. But it can also make you myopic. You can spend years optimizing a position inside a market that will never give you power. You can be the best operator in a mediocre category. You can gain share and lose economics. You can celebrate growth while your margin becomes the customer's property. The central idea is not that every company must become Google, PayPal, or Tesla. That would be a superficial reading. The idea is that every operator must ask, where am I accepting competition as if it were destiny? Where am I copying the market's logic instead of writing a new one? Where is my product only 20% better when it should be 10 times in a critical dimension? Where am I scaling before dominating? Where am I confusing a large market with a real opportunity? In the comments, write your strategic secret in one sentence. Most people believe the market works through X, but we are betting the real value will be captured through Y. No pitch. No paragraphs. One sentence. If it does not come out, it is not a communication problem, it is a strategy problem. Here, we do not summarize books. We turn them into operating systems for real operators. And this system can be summarized like this. Do not compete for an obvious market. Find a secret. Dominate a niche. Build power. And only then scale. Because competition does not make you strategic. Competition, many times, only makes you poor.